All right, I think that's enough time. Fantastic. All right, let's get started. Maybe we'll do some introductions because I think there might be some new teams on the call that haven't seen us before and don't know who we are. So we'll do some introductions. I'll go first. My name is Holly. I'm the head statics judge for FSAI, having done Formula Student for a number of years and helped set up the AI competition. I'm now a product development engineer at Street Drone, working on autonomous cars, but in the background primarily in motorsport and systems control. Maybe Allistair, do you want to go next?
Oh, hi, I'm Allistair Stevenson. I'm kind of looking after the sporting side of the dynamic event, so keeping everybody on track and making sure that everything runs smoothly when you're actually at the circuit. I've been, prior to the FSAI stuff, I'm currently still an EV scrutineer as well, and I've been on and off involved with Formula Students since about 2007.
Fantastic, thanks Allistair. Rose, do you want to go next?
Sure, thanks Holly. Rose Westby, I'm currently ABB's Global Director for Digital Transformation. I've been leading the business plan presentations for a number of years now and was a competitor back in 2014 as a team leader.
Fantastic, thanks Rose. And Ian?
Hi, so I'm Ian Murphy. My role in Formula Student is as the FSAI technical project lead. So a lot of that revolves around the ADS-DV vehicle, but it also extends to those teams bringing their own vehicle as well, particularly in terms of like scrutineering of the braking system and FMEAs and things like that. My background with Formula Student goes back probably 20 years or so to when it was a little event at the NEC before it went to Bruntingthorpe and then on to Silverstone. Originally, I did some design judging, but in the last 3-4 years, I guess I've been involved mainly with the AI competition. And during the day, I work for two companies, basically. I work for Street Drone, the same as Holly does, and I also have another involvement with a company called Rockfort Engineering, which does electric vehicle powertrains. So that's me.
Fantastic, thanks everyone. So welcome to Learn to Win, everybody. Very exciting, obviously, to have you guys virtually this year. It's such a shame we can't do it in person, but I think this will work well anyway. So this morning's session is a general session, and then we'll go into some Q&A, and I think teams have specific Q&A sessions as well. So I think what we'll do this morning is mainly for obviously the new teams' benefits, but also teams that were participating this year as well. We're going to go through some of the rule changes that have been implemented in the last few weeks. So there are some small updates to the rules. I will go through the static rules. And I think, Ian, do you want to go through the other rule changes that we've made as well?
Yeah, I can probably go through the technical rules, which actually come first in the document, don't they? But yeah.
Yeah, do you want to go ahead and start with that?
Okay, yeah. So shall we try and share the document? What's the easiest way to do that? If I hit that there. And application. Right. Okay, hopefully you can see, Adobe on the screen. So we've literally just released the fully formatted PDF of this 2021 rule set. I think it isn't on the website yet. I suspect it isn't there, but it will be as part of the normal rules package. I mean, the first thing to say to all the teams involved is make sure you keep an eye on the iMechie website almost on a daily basis, but certainly on a weekly basis, because stuff does get posted up there all the time, particularly this time of year when there are rules being released and competition deadlines and other things coming out. It's very important to keep abreast of information release. It's a bit of a struggle sometimes to, if you get lots of queries about a certain thing when there's a document on the website telling you the information you need to do and it hadn't been looked for. So it's worth pointing out that. So we'll scroll through this document. It is very similar, I think, in many respects, certainly on the technical side, to the 2020 rules. So hopefully all those teams who've been involved with 2020 will be familiar with this, but we'll go through it anyway. I won't read it line by line, but I'll point out the important stuff as we scroll down. If anything happens to the stream and it's not legible, just give me a shout and I can obviously scroll back or whatever. So the introduction to the competition, we'll skip through that. I think the main change we made here is to do with the sharing of the ADS-DV vehicles. The original the way these rules were written originally, the idea was that there would be a lot of ADS-DV vehicles being bought by universities and run by universities, and they would basically turn up at the competition with their own vehicle. The way things are working at the moment, there's actually a much bigger emphasis on sharing of a vehicle. So we've just added a few notes here and there in the document to clarify the sharing of the vehicles. For example, here we say that there will be some specific rules applying to those teams sharing a vehicle to ensure a fair competition. That's mainly a protocol to do with like how you get access to the vehicle during the dynamic events, put your software on it, then take it off again and pass it on to the next team. Allistair is essentially in charge of that protocol as ensuring a fair competition. There's another note here, which I think should be hopefully familiar. The automated driving system class, those teams that will bring their own vehicle, follows the standard Formula Student rules, the global rules for that. There are probably a few minor exceptions, which we'll get to as we go through this. So yeah, the automated driving system class, that's basically, as I just said, that's built to the rules for the Formula Student driverless vehicles and follow all of those rules. So I won't really get into that, because really I think the main differences for the UK event are to do with the static and dynamic events rather than on the technical side. We're expecting the rules to be completely followed on the technical side. For the dynamic driving task, just as a quick introduction, obviously the vehicle itself can be purchased, or I guess I should say could be purchased. I don't think we'll be able to supply new vehicles for this year if anyone did in fact suddenly turn up with some cash to buy one. So essentially there will be 2 shared vehicles at the event this year, which will be shared amongst the shared teams, plus we're expecting to see Coventry with their own vehicle as well. I guess a key point about the shared vehicle is, and this is an additional entry in the rulebook, is that it's going to be fitted with a standard computer and stereo camera sensor. We do get a lot of questions asking about, first of all, the specification of the computer and the camera. I'll get to that, I'm sure, at some point in this Q&A session. But also, can teams add their own sensors? The answer to that is yes, within certain limits to do with being able to share the vehicle. So we do need to individually approve each team's application for fitting additional sensors to the vehicle and go through the protocol to fit those and remove those. And we've made some design changes to the vehicles to facilitate that with a quick change standardized platform for sensors to be mounted to. So hopefully that won't be a big challenge to deal with, but it is something that we will engage with the teams individually. When if you say you want to fit your own sensors, then we'll go through that process. And that brings us on to the administrative regulations. So one of the first things here, we have define this role of autonomous system responsible slightly differently for the DDT class, because essentially it's more about operating the vehicle than it is about the design and build of the vehicle. Documentation and deadlines, this is the standard thing of there will be a key dates document released. I don't believe that key dates document is currently on the website. There is a 2020 version around, which you could probably crib from. The main submissions are the autonomous design report, the autonomous systems form, and the autonomous systems responsible application as to who's going to be doing that. Autonomous systems form is quite important. Any team that is planning to use a shared vehicle and wants to fit additional sensors, we want you to outline that fact and also what you plan to do on the autonomous system form. There is a note to that effect somewhere else in the rules. As we scroll down, we'll come across it. So in terms of technical regulations, most of this is as 2020. At the moment, this document still references the Formula Student 2020 rules. I don't believe that document is being up-issued because of the freeze of the rules to carry over from 2020. So although it mentions 2020, that don't think you're missing out on the 2021 document. I don't believe there will be an update there. So there's a clarification here. Teams using the shared vehicle must produce the software and may also select and supply additional sensors subject to IMAKE approval.
think Ian's frozen. We'll give him a minute to come back.
Did I drop out a second? Hopefully I'm back.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
I think this is fairly straightforward. You can read this for yourselves. Push bar. Yep, you have to push the ADS-DV around with the push bar outside the dynamic areas, even though it can be controlled with a joystick. That's not something that we allow outside the dynamic areas. That equipment will be provided for the ADS-DV vehicles. Clearly, there's no point in all of the teams sharing the vehicle buying their own fire extinguishers, but that is a clarification that probably didn't appear in the rules previously. This baseline vehicle section here is really about those teams who've bought their own vehicle, saying don't change it because it's an homologated vehicle built to a certain specification. So any team that uses the shared vehicle, don't worry about that. It will be a compliant vehicle. We'll provide that for you. There's a clarification here that teams sharing the vehicle are providing a disk drive rather than the whole computer. So we can get into that in terms of technical details, but basically there's a disk caddy that takes a standard 2.5-inch MSATA drive, and we would highly recommend a solid state disk, but I guess it would work with a hard disk. And I'll point you to some resources on this as we go through the session, but basically there will be information on that computer available for everyone to understand. We've had reasonably good success with people just installing a standard version of Ubuntu onto a disk and plugging it in and then having it boot and run. So it doesn't seem too challenging, but obviously there will be some work to be done there in terms of like checking the vehicles ahead of time, and that will form part of the event timetable and also the sharing vehicle protocol in terms of access to the vehicle close to the competition, such that you can test your setup without, in a fair way, whilst respecting other teams also need to test their setup. I guess this whole section here has not changed, but it is worth pointing out that the teams sharing a vehicle as well as the teams with their own vehicle will be controlling the vehicle in exactly the same way. The vehicle has its own control unit. That control unit provides the drive-by-wire system, and to interface with that drive-by-wire system there is a standard CAN communications protocol. That's no different whether it's the iMakeE vehicle or if you were to buy a vehicle for yourself. And there are some resources associated with that. There is a definition of the protocol. There's also going to be some software released which allows you to wrap a Linux socket CAN interface to that, and an explanation of how to use that. And that will be released in due course. I'm going to scroll down not to take up too much time. Autonomous system form. So we've updated this part of the document to fully specify that in the case of teams using the shared vehicle, this ASF must contain the request to fit the additional sensors, which will be approved or denied on a case-by-case basis. So this is something that we want to engage with all the teams to make sure that in good time you understand exactly what you can and can't do in terms of fitting additional sensors. One clarification here for the ADS-DV, because the ADS-DV does not have a roll hoop, we have basically outlined the envelope within that the sensors must be fitted within, from the top of the T-cell, that's the traction system active light, which is on the top of the vehicle, and the outside edges of the tires, and there will be a drawing released for that envelope. Let me just see if I can share my CAD screen that shows what that will look like. Just going to share a different screen. Everyone see that okay? Yeah. So basically this line here are the allowed positions for sensors. That sort of purple blob there, that is the position of the camera on the standard shared vehicle. The only team that really will be doing something different that will be Coventry, I think, who will own their own vehicle. But essentially what we're defining is that the top of this dome is the top of the vehicle for the purposes of the rules, because there is no roll loop. This sort of magenta tealy thing, that's the actual traction system active light, and then there's a antenna and other stuff and the sounder in the dome above that. So we've actually raised the top of the car by maybe 50 to 100 millimeters compared to how it was running in 2019, just to provide a little bit more of a slope to this line and give a little bit more volume in this area. Okay, back to the rules. So there is a provision within the rulebook for mounting sensors in front of the vehicle. It's 500 mil above the ground and 700 millimeters forward of the front axle. What we're saying for the shared vehicle is we won't permit people to mount sensors in this zone. Two reasons for that. One is it makes the wiring of those sensors even more complicated because it has to run all the way to the front of the vehicle. I guess there's three reasons. One is we don't want to put sensors in an area where they could potentially be damaged. Although the rules allow for that, it's definitely a very vulnerable place to put an expensive sensor. And also the mounting structure in that area is not very easy to, it's not so straightforward to provide a generic bracket that everyone can use. So for that reason, we have decided not to permit sensors in this zone for the shared vehicles. If there is a team that has absolutely built their entire program around having a sensor in that zone, and this is going to be a huge issue for, then please start talking to us about that and we'll see what we can do. But at the moment, the policy for that is we're not going to permit sensors to be mounted in that zone. Nobody used that zone in 2019, I believe. And then the rest of the rules, I think, is pretty much unchanged from 2020. All of the requirements for inspection, the static missions, the autonomous demonstration. Yeah, all of that stuff is completely unchanged. So, I mean, it's worth just quickly going through that. So in terms of inspecting the vehicle, if it's a vehicle that's owned by the university, we will check it for that it hasn't been tampered with, and if it meets the rules. If it's a shared vehicle, you don't need to worry about that because it will meet the rules. The AI systems checks, this will be done according to a timetable that we'll work out for the event so that everyone gets time. But basically, the static inspection, a mission will be executed, which is turning the wheels and turning the wheels around and steering. Static inspection B is essentially the same, and then triggering the brake system, the emergency brake system. And this is a basic demonstration that your software can run through the state machine that the rules indicate. And then the autonomous demonstration is a dynamic event, and it's basically like a sort of dry run of the acceleration event. The only difference is you have to actually stop and then restart and then deploy the brake system. So it's like a sort of pull away, pull to a stop, accelerate again and deploy the brakes and not hit any cones. So the timetable will obviously is still a long way away from being defined, but there will be opportunities for this demonstration to be conducted, leading up to the actual dynamic events. Okay, so that's everything I think I can contribute to this. So the next sections of the rules are the static events and the dynamic events. So do you want me to leave this?
That's right. If you scroll down, then I'll present mine as well.
Yeah, just tell me when to scroll down and I'll.
Yeah, perfect. All right, so thanks Ian for those updates. If anybody's got any questions, again, put them in the chat and we can answer them at the end of our presentation. So now we'll run through some of the changes to the static events. And so these changes have been made mainly on the basis of the feedback that we got from all the teams this year and last year as well. So hopefully this should improve some of the static events for everybody. We're quite mindful that the static events might either be held in person or virtually this coming year, probably likely virtually, which I'll run through some options in a minute. And so that's just worth bearing in mind as well. So for the business plan, Rose, I believe there's no changes for this year, is that correct?
That's correct. The only significant changes that we do have every year, of course, are the special condition. And in this case, the special condition is listed there in point 1.1.4. So do take the time to read through those special conditions and make sure that you're really directing that business case in the right direction for the judges that you have at the time of the event. I believe it's probably likely going to be the case, exactly, Holly, to your point, that it's going to be run virtually, and we'll be using some tools in order to connect virtually for those presentations next year.
Fantastic, thanks, Rose. Again, any questions about business, just write in the chat and we'll have a go. Ian, could you scroll down to the design event, please?
Is that good?
Yeah, perfect. So in terms of rules and guidance, not much has changed in the design. So the only guidance really that's changed in the design is, so we're actually adding a new event for this year, which is going to be called Simulation Development, for those teams who haven't done it before. We actually ran it as an optional event in 2020, but we think it went really well. All the teams really enjoyed it, and I think it really adds to the competition and helps teams become prepared for the actual racing. So that was really successful. So we're actually adding Simulation Development as a compulsory event this year. So the only change is that we've recommended in the design event for both ADS and DDT that teams don't discuss their simulation too much. So you can mention it. Let me check where this rule change was. Have a look. Yes, if you scroll down to the next page, Ian, so S2.7.3, oh no, 2.7.4, sorry. So that is a recommendation that teams, you don't have to discuss your simulation too much in the design report and the design presentation, as this will be covered in your simulation development presentations. So obviously you can mention it as part of your integration and development process of your system, but we'd encourage you not to spend too much time, as you'll score more points if you mention this in the simulation development category. So I think that's the main change for design. We've also streamlined all of the timings for design, real world as well, and simulation development. And so the feedback from the teams last year, it was a bit confusing having different timings for different events. So this year we're going to have 15 minutes of presentation time for each event, and then we're going to have 15 minutes of Q&A as well afterwards. So hopefully that makes it a little bit easier for everybody when we come to the scheduling. Fantastic. So that's all of design, and then yeah, please add your questions in the chat. So let's scroll down to the real world event. So there's a few changes here. This is the main area of changes for the statics this year. So we had a lot of feedback on this event. Teams really like this event, and we love listening to teams, and they're fantastically creative in what you present to us, and we really love that. So we're trying to preserve the creativeness of thinking in this competition, but also make it a little bit easier for us to judge what you present. So the teams present a very varying challenges. And so we find it quite difficult to judge sometimes because the teams are so different. So what we've tried to do is we've actually split up the real world competition. So now we'd like half of your presentation to be on analysis of the minimum of the 3 topics. So you see in S3.1.1, this is now a bit of an easier list to read. So we put in bullet points of the topics that we'd like you to talk about. So this should take up half of the 15-minute presentation. And so we've got some topics in there that you can talk about. So we'd like to see a minimum of 3 of those discussed. So that would be fantastic to see you discuss those. The other half of the presentation marks will be awarded for a more detailed analysis of a specific case study. So this case study is up to you generally in what you choose to analyse, but we'd like the case study to include topics around connectivity and cloud-based services for autonomous vehicles in the real world. So it could include, but it's definitely not limited to, technologies such as 5G, cybersecurity, or V2X. So hopefully this should make it a little bit clearer. So that should also make up then the other half of your 15-minute presentation. So again, feel free to add questions in the chat and we can answer them afterwards. So again, the FSI, the real world AI event has been shortened a little bit to 15 minutes of presentation and then 15 minutes of Q&A as well. So those are the main discussions for those. And then so we'll scroll down to simulation development, which is the last area of discussion for these. Fantastic. So this is a brand new event for this year. Obviously, we hosted it as a trial run in 2020, which was really successful. It was great to see the teams develop their simulation. And I mean, the first thing to say is that we encourage all teams to enter this event, even if you have very basic simulations, because everything will help, all the feedback will help you to progress in the physical hardware as well as the virtual as well. So you can have a look at the rules. So the rules for simulation development are almost identical to 2020 for those teams that have done it before. So you can read through those events there. There's a bullet point list that you can see there of the topics that we'd like you to include. So always remember that the score sheet generally does reflect those topics in the bullet points. We've also, so for new teams, if you've never developed simulation before or you're looking to advance your simulation, the Edinburgh University former student team have very kindly open sourced their gazebo simulator for FSAI. So the link is also posted in there, and you can access that through GitLab, which is really exciting. So any teams that have never had a go, feel free to download that. That's all free and should be up to date. So that's fantastic. So you can always use that as your starting point and develop from there. And again, the simulation development is 15 minutes of presentation and then 15 minutes of Q&A. So that's it for the specifics on statics. And so we've actually updated the scoring as well. I don't know if, Ian, there's somewhere that you can scroll. I think it's almost all the way to the top. There's a page somewhere on the scores. Let's have a look. Yes, on page 3, I think.
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, I think it's right near the front, isn't it? There we go. Yeah, well, the scoring is slightly different. So the ADS class, there is your score.
Yeah.
100. And for the DDT class, there is a scoring. So I think it's actually the same breakdown, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is. So,
yeah, there's no difference in the breakdown, so that applies equally. Same weighting for all the.
So we adjusted some of the static events to include simulation development, but we didn't want to overbalance the dynamic events to the static events. So it's still the same ratio of points that you get for static versus dynamic, and we've still got the same total points as 1,000 for each team. So hopefully that should make sense. So engineering design is the highest scored, so it's 150, and then the other events are 100 points. So hopefully that should all make sense. Fantastic. Let's have a look.
So I was looking at the chat, and there's a couple of questions in there that I can cover, which I probably should have covered when I was doing my section. So the first question from Mohammed is, what's the process for getting testing time before the competition, or is that not possible? Yeah, the answer to that question is yes, it's definitely possible. The schedule for availability of the vehicle is not yet set in stone. We did try and work through a schedule for 2020, but then COVID came along and derailed that. So the first thing to say is it depends on us finding suitable venues for a shared test session. In the past, we've done that at Myra in the UK. Potentially also Bruntingthorpe is a possibility. The car has run at both of those locations, and they were friendly to us, and so we potentially use those locations again. So I mean, I haven't got any specifics beyond the fact that we're working towards the plan of having test sessions in the I guess probably beginning around March time 2021. Again, the situation with COVID may or may not cause a problem with there, but we're working towards those being available. what we did in 2019 was we had one static day, which was hosted by one of the project partners, Hypermotive, where they're based in Lutterworth, which is quite close to Bruntingthorpe, where the teams that were entering the competition that year came to access the car, plug into it. It was just in a workshop on stands with the wheels in the air. Wasn't a true dynamic event, but everyone was who attended that test session was able to run through their state machine and activate the mission, run the wheels, then like deactivate the mission and activate the brake system, that kind of thing. So that was a very valuable exercise. So I imagine we'll do a similar thing for 2021. There will be probably 2 or 3 opportunities to attend one of those static test sessions, and then there will be some dynamic test sessions made available. The other thing we're likely to do, or at least we would like to do, is on the week before the competition itself, then teams that are coming from overseas potentially can arrive a couple of days early and get access to the vehicle ahead of the competition as well. For 2020, when the competition was intended to be at Silverstone, we had allocated an area to do that on, I think it was like the Wednesday, Tuesday and the Wednesday before the competition, and we will endeavour to do the same thing again. Priority will be given to those teams who are coming from overseas, because we really can't expect them to come over just for one of the one-off test sessions. I mean, they're welcome to, but as an expectation, that's quite high. So yeah, to answer the question, there will be testing available. The other thing to say is that there was going to be some resources published, again, probably in the new year, to allow you to build a hardware in the loop simulator of the ADS-DV, in terms of specifically the CAN interface to that. Those resources will be more of a tutorial in terms of, like, you can get yourself some simple off-the-shelf hardware, plug into it, and then there will be a software project that will be published that will allow you to essentially, have a virtual vehicle, or it's more than just a virtual vehicle, because it'll be hardware in the loop with a CAN link. But it's obviously not a real vehicle. And we know that some teams will be able to take that and extend that to, for example, using surrogate vehicles such as a radio control car chassis, or Edinburgh used an electric wheelchair as their test platform. And the idea will be that with that software project resource, you'll be able to build essentially a surrogate of the vehicle should you wish to. So again, the idea there is to get experience with interfacing to the vehicle according to the defined interface ahead of the competition. Because what we realized was that that's actually quite a challenging thing to do for some teams. It's a first time they've interfaced with drive-by-wire systems. And whilst it's not a particularly exciting part of an AI competition, it's an absolutely necessary part of this engineering space, is interfacing to vehicle systems like that. So it's part of the education experience to do that, and we're going to provide resources to do that. The other question that I can answer straight away is how we expected, this is from Ivan, how we expected to mount sensors on the vehicle. Are there special mounting locations on the car? The answer is yes. I will show you by sharing my CAD screen again. Okay, hopefully that's come up. Can someone confirm that the CAD's up on the screen? Because I've got a window full of CAD and no hopping at the moment. So if we do that, so the eagle-eyed amongst you will notice these holes in the bodywork that weren't there before. And if I unhide the sensor plate, what we've done for 2020, well, it's the 2020 update, but obviously that didn't run, so it's really the 2021 update, is put some threaded fastener on top plate on the chassis under the bodywork. You see these pillars. Those pillars are basically just tubes. So they essentially, a bolt can run from the top here through that tube into a threaded fastener. So you basically, there'll be a bolt head here. I mean, you're welcome to use as many or as few of these holes as you need to. I've drawn a sort of fairly generic, plate there. for example, a smaller, neater sort of triangle could be created, or you can make any shape you like. Really, that whole pattern will be released. Simple flat plate can be ordered, laser cut for like about £5 if you get the right supplier, or if you can't, most teams will be able to make those. If you're really struggling, we can probably supply something, but it's such a simple design that hopefully everyone will be able to make that. And the idea is that the protocol for fixing and removing your sensors will be 4 or 5 in this case long bolts through to engage with those threads. We'll torque those up with an electric screwdriver, and then there will be a connector underneath. It's not entirely clear. This line here and this line here represent the split lines for the bodywork. So this section actually comes off separate to the main shark's fin and the nose, with just 4 fasteners. So we'll be able to pass cable through, connect up to the cables that you need to use, and then put the bodywork on, put the plate on, and then you'll be able to run your tests. Changeover time for sensors like this will come out of your competition time allocation for your runs, and that's something that Allistair will work on with the sharing document, because it's essentially we need to divide the time up into slots. If the slot is 20 minutes long, let's say if you're not using your sensor plate, you get a whole 20 minutes to try and make an attempt to run the car. If you take 10 minutes at the beginning to fit this, there's going to be a mandatory 5 minutes to remove it at the end. So yeah, you might only get 5 minutes to run your slot. So just be mindful of the fact that the more complexity that you might put into an installation, the less time you might get to actually run. And this is why, as I say, any teams wishing to use an additional sensor, please get in touch with us. It's mandatory that you submit that request as part of the autonomous systems form. The autonomous systems form does have a deadline, but there's nothing in the rules saying you can't submit that before the deadline, and we would absolutely encourage you to do so if you intend to apply for additional sensors, because it just gives us more time to discuss it with you. So.
Fantastic, thanks Ian. So I'm just conscious that we've only got about 5 minutes left of the session, and so what I also wanted to do, so I'm just going to run through as well. I think there's a few more questions. So Ivan, I hope that we've answered your question about the real world AI by going through the rules. It's in the rules, but we like to have a mix of what you understand of the industry now. So we like to see case studies from the current industry of autonomous vehicles, and we put the specific case studies in there as well that we'd like you to look at. But we really encourage you to have a think about what the industry will be like. So I guess that's the imaginary part. So we'd like you to have a think about the next 5, 30, 100 years, doesn't matter how far you go. You can by all means have a think about that as well, and we like to see predictions. So for the last few minutes, I believe, Lucy, are you on the call somewhere? Do you have sound? So what we'd like to do is just go through some of the options for what we think might happen to. Oh, hi, Lucy.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, brilliant. So what we'd like to do is just go through some of the scenarios that we think might happen to the competition in 2021. Lucy, I'll share my screen, and then we can.
Amazing, thank you. Would you mind just skipping straight to slide 5? I reckon we can start from. Perfect. I'm going to do a Chris Whitty impression in a minute and be all next slide, please. So I'll try and really quickly do this. So the 3 scenarios that we've got for planning for the live competition for a competition for 2021, we are referring to them as scenarios A, B, and C. Very original there, but it's just to make it easy for our planning, and when we communicate to you, the teams, about where we are in the planning and what needs to change, we'll be referring to them as we're proceeding with scenario A, or we've taken the decision to move to scenario B, and so on. So I'll just run through them really briefly, and specific to AI teams, because I know Andrew Deakin is going to do a broader overview of this shortly on the main stage. So scenario A is essentially the static event heats will be held virtually. So much like we did in July this year, we did the entire competition online this year, but we will do the static event heats online in scenario A because we're already anticipating that a live event of any sort is likely to be very different to what we have been able to do in the past. We're likely to have to control capacity, and we're likely to have to be aware of social distancing. So being able to deliver the heats for the static events online virtually does just help us manage that slightly. We are planning for a live event to take place in July, and that will be for scrutineering, dynamic running and static event finals. So you'll do your heats for design, real world, simulation development and business presentation online, but then finalists will be invited to the live event to present. Now, we are also conscious that there may be restrictions on travel or teams just not able to travel for COVID reasons. So finalists will also still be permitted to participate in the finals virtually. We will make contingency for that. And we are hoping that in scenario A, we will be able to invite any teams not participating in the finals or perhaps that don't have a running car to attend as spectators, so they will still be able to experience a live event. Next slide, Holly, please. So this just gives an overview of what that means for AI teams. So like I said, your static event heats are on an online platform. Your vehicle status video, we are going to ask for that.
Morning, Natalie.
Sorry, just let me close down my backstage there. Get some feedback. Yeah, if you are doing the ADS class and you are building your autonomous vehicle, we are going to ask you for a vehicle status video at some point prior to the live event. Just because, again, we will be capacity limited and we want to make sure that only teams that have the chance of a running vehicle at that live event are going to come along. More details on that to follow. Next slide, please, Holly. And then this just gives you a bit of a timeline. So scenario A, this is our preferred scenario. So this is what we're going with for now. Plan to have a live event with static event heats. But we are conscious that we do need to keep you or apprise of decision making and give you enough time to switch around if you need to. So we will make a decision to switch to scenario B no later than March, and scenario C, which we'll come on to, no later than April. The static event heats are likely to take place across a time frame between April and June, so we'll spread them out a little bit for you so you don't have everything taking place in one time. We can do that with virtual heats, and then the live event will be in its traditional calendar slot in July at some time, date TBC. Next slide, Holly, please. So scenario B, we would take the decision to move to this no later than March, and this will be if we can't guarantee that we can do scenario A, basically. What that will mean is we'll scale it back even further. Business plan presentation will take place entirely virtually, so no live finals. But all of the other static events heats will still take place virtually. Sorry, all of the AI events, all of the AI static events will take place virtually, but there will still be a live dynamic event planned for July. Next slide, Holly, please. So again, that just gives you that summary, all your static events online, live event for dynamic events, probably a reduced number of spectators if we are able to have spectators, as in registered teams. But this scenario B does still assume that we have a live event of some kind. Next slide, Holly. And again, that just shows that by March we would have confirmed if we're going with scenario B. Again, the static events will be spread out between April and June, so you don't have to do all of those in one go, and the live event will still take place in July. And scenario C, this is the one we really don't want to do, but we did do it successfully this year, so we can only improve upon that. Scenario C is an entirely virtual event, so this we'll make this decision no later than April, and this will be if there is no guarantee that we're going to be able to hold a live event, and that could be for so many reasons. COVID, obviously, but not just the situation we're in at that time, the situation we're in prior to that. How likely is it that you're going to be able to build cars, get time with the EdSDV, get access to workshops, get access to be together as teams to do the project? So there's many reasons why we may not be able to have a live event. And we'll make that decision by April, and that will just mean that everything will be virtually. We'll do all the static events, and we will have some dynamic events as well that will be held virtually.
Fantastic.
Okay.
I think that's about it, isn't it, Lucy?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Right. Cool. We can see many around. Fantastic, thanks. So we've nearly run out of time. Lucy, what's the best way for the teams during the day to contact us? Some of them have individual sessions, don't they?
Yeah, so if you've got your individual sessions, on your joining instructions, you've got the links to that. So make sure you use the links in your joining instructions. You can't navigate to them from the Hopin platform because they're hidden sessions exclusive to you. So make sure you refer back to those joining instructions. But you've got the names of all our lovely AI team here, so make a note of that, and you can at them in the event chat throughout the day. If they are not online at the time and can't see it, we'll collate those questions and we'll pass those on and get some answers to you post event.
Fantastic. All right, thanks everybody. That's the end of this session. So we'll see you soon.
Just quickly, Holly, there's one link that's worth highlighting that's in the chat at the moment, which is to the GitHub. That's I guess you'd call it the official GitHub for the FSAI competition, and there are some resources on there that would be useful. So if I just very, very quickly show you what those are. Let's find the right screen. You got that? Can you see?
We can just see ourselves at the moment.
Okay, it didn't share properly. Let's try again. Any better? Yeah, there we go. So it's a fairly simple URL. I've put it in the chat, but it's FSAI on GitHub. You can find it without just by searching for it. So the legacy resources for 2019, which included some software library and some support material, is under the 2019 repository. There's a 2020 repository, which will probably be renamed 2020-21 because it's basically just a continuation of what we tried to do this year. If you look in here, there is a README, and at the moment there's only one real significant resource, which is in the issues, which is information on the base platform, sensors and hardware. And basically, as far as sharing information is concerned, the way I would like that to work is people can raise an issue within that GitHub repository and tag it with a question, and then we'll hopefully try and answer it. And I've tried to label these as with suitable labels so that it makes sense. So this information will likely be also published in a document form.
Just a crucial point.
This hub is that the questions and answers can be done a bit more interactively and a bit more responsive. So please take a quick look at that. And then, yeah, maybe we can start some questions and answers in that. Okay.
Fantastic. All right then, thanks everybody. Keep posting your questions and we'll get to them throughout the day. So that's it for our session at the moment. So thank you.
Cheers then, bye.
Bye everyone.